Today I want to share 5 tips for drawing better lips, and I will go over some common bad habits you can develop and how to get rid of them. You can use these tips for all kinds of styles. They are meant to make your drawings look more believable overall. Not everything needs to look hyper-realistic, but there are certain tricks you can use for your advantage. The left side of this sheet will be a really exaggerated negative example, just so you can clearly see the difference. Diving right into tip number 1 with the corners of the mouth. This is something which will give your lips more life and definition. If you just end your mouth corners with straight lines, it might look a bit flat, like something is missing. Well, if you pay closer attention to lips in real life, you'll notice that the corners of the mouth most of the times show downward and then slightly upward at the end. This is a very subtle detail, and of course this varies from person to person, but this feature gives the lip a lot more character, and from here on you can stylize it even more and exaggerate features if you want. You just have more options to play with and also more artistic choices. It gives you a more organic, natural look to the shape of the lips. Also, what I always like to do is emphasize the corners with some shadow to make it look deeper. There is just a lot of depth here, so if you keep that in mind, it will make the lips look more 3D too, but I will show this when I talk about the shading. Tip number 2 is avoiding drawing a heavy contour outline. This is a very common habit, not only when drawing lips, but portraits in general. There is something I always tell myself, and I really try to burn this into my brain. There are no outlines in real life. So, of course, we all sketch the outlines of lips first before we jump into shading and coloring, but try to put not too much pressure on the lip contours if you want them to look more believable. The transition from lip to skin should be a softer one, without a clear edge line. So try to take your sketch line as a rough guideline for your shading, not as something that stays until the end. Tip number 3 is all about shading and values. Common mistakes I notice is that the shading is done quite randomly. For example, people like to shade the upper lip darker than the lower lip, which is not wrong in itself, but in the process you might lose the value of the mouth line. And the mouth line is actually the darkest part of the mouth. It is the part where the two lips touch each other, and this interaction causes shadow. You don't want to lose the value of the mouth line and the corners of the mouth, because this is the part that opens. There is a lot of depth here. Tip number 4 is adding texture. Now, a lot of times I see that people just skip this or stop at this point, and this is fine, but if you want to add details which add a nice realistic touch to your lips, try incorporating some texture. Common bad habits I see here are adding too many, too strong, and too flat lip lines. The texture should not be too dominant and overshadow everything else. Now, I know you can easily get lost with having fun while adding so much detail, but try to hold yourself back and keep it lighter and softer. Overall, the lip texture is more prominent on the lower lip, and it is not perfectly symmetrical. Try to follow the lip as an actual 3D object, like a tube, and curve it around the shape. Try to vary the length of the lines, the thickness and darkness. To me in general, making things seem more organic is always having a level of contrast and variation. I try not to have everything perfectly symmetrical and evenly aligned. I always try to incorporate a tiny level of randomness. Tip number 5 is for the most fun part we all love drawing, the highlights. Just like with adding texture, it is just so easy to get carried away and add a whole bunch of highlight areas, oftentimes bold and thick, because it is just so much fun to add these and we really want to make our lips look shiny and have the last detail really popping out. But you can achieve a better result by keeping it more minimal and remembering the texture. You can make it look more organic instead of artificial by adding texture along with the highlights. Don't draw a continuous line, try to interrupt the line and follow the texture you already created. These were all tips I had for drawing better lips. I hope you found some of them useful and that you can incorporate some of them in your drawing routine. These are also things I like to remind myself of as I'm learning and growing as an artist. Sometimes it's just minor things that change the overall appearance, and we all learn from our mistakes. Let me know what you struggle with in the comments.